Serious, scientists of Reddit. What is something you desperately want to experiment with, but will make you look like a mad scientist? I want to take DNA from infamous serial killers like Dahmer or Albert Fish or the like, clone them, then have the baby raised in a normal, supportive, loving family. I'd study the kids all through adulthood to see how much is nurture and how much is nature. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is how you turn a mad scientist into a dead scientist. I want to do a long-term case study on children's microbiome. It would start with samples of their mother's microbiome. And then when the child is first born, get a sample of this, compare it, and continue comparing the two samples throughout breastfeeding versus bottle feeding. Also get a detailed comparison of how the microbiome changes after vaccinations, sickness, antibiotics. I would basically study every single poop this child has, their eating habits, their health conditions, any medications, vaccinations, etc. for years. But people want privacy, and most wouldn't want to commit to keeping such accurate accounts of their children's food/health/activities. So it's likely that, even if I did this study, it would be difficult to prove all variables were accounted for. And with all the variability, I would need many children. The end goal is to see how our microbiome changes throughout your childhood. And note when you may be more susceptible to things depending on the type of microflora you have. Everyone has a different ratio. So essentially, if we can harness the individual's capability of unique flora, we could find a whole new way to tackle illnesses and preventatives for sicknesses that would have significantly less side effects than many other medications. This idea stems from others studying the microbiome and finding that certain ratios of microflora can cause you to get over illnesses quicker when combined with the right medicine, and also help digestive tracts regulate better. But so far these tests are being done with cancer patients. I think if we are able to see how children are affected, it may bring less possibilities of cancer and other illnesses down the road, as well as a faster recovery time. Edit. Everyone telling me to have a kid or become a nanny and collect it. No. The point of this study is it needs to include thousands of participants. I am a physician and I would love to see how far the placebo effect really goes. For those who are not familiar, the placebo effect is an unexplained phenomena where people who take medications that aren't real, but they believe are real, have an actual, measurable effect on their illness. People with depression who take sugar pills report feeling happier. People with pain who take sugar pills report a decrease to their pain, etc. I've seen even crazier ones where people think they are having surgery for their bad knee, but the docs just put them under, make an incision on their knee, do nothing, sew them back up, and patients report improvement to their bad knee. So part of me just wants to explore this shit to its full extent. Can we treat chronic illnesses like arthritis, lupus and bipolar disorder with just placebos? What about viral illness? Can you imagine if someone's HIV viral load decreased while they were eating Skittles thinking it's a new miracle drug, but it's pretty much just fantasy? You'd have to take two groups of HIV positive individuals, give one real medicine and the other one Skittles, and this is profoundly unethical. Edit. For those of you who are saying that is how clinical trials work, the answer is not really. According to the Article 11.3 of the Declaration of Helsinki, which is the ethical guidance of clinicians overseeing clinical trials, it is unethical to use placebo arms if there exists a proven medication for the condition. If you are testing a new drug, your control group is whatever the best treatment available on the market, not a placebo. It is very rare that a disease/condition has no effective treatments out there that would justify the use of a placebo to measure clinical effectiveness. In my HIV example, this is obviously not possible. We have meds that lower HIV viral load. A friend of my mum's basically attempted this. One of her work colleagues suggested it. She's a nurse and basically her partner was having problems in the bedroom. So she told her to make him take these. They were mints that were distinctively resembled a certain drug. Basically she gave them to him, and voila, the mints work. She couldn't bring herself to tell him that they were just mints. I experiment on ancient coins. Museums are generally against me doing a full compositional analysis, as that would involve me dissolving the whole coin in acid. But it sure would tell us a lot more than not.
N.
It's generally a bummer how many kinds of analysis are destructive. Though I do remember doing a cool experiment in intro chemistry to determine silver content through neutron activation. Lot easier to do when there's a reactor under the psych building.
N.
Experiments with social isolation intrigue me. Raise a child with no language and see what happens. No contact. Wild children give us some insights, but also a sample of the kind of trauma this can produce. Completely and undeniably unethical, incredibly cruel, but so intriguing. This have already been done and documented in the past. There was this king who believed that children raised in completely isolation would naturally speak Greek. So to test this, he ordered a group of babies to be placed in isolation from adults, and a few times per day midwives would feed/clean them. The result of this experiment was that every single baby died, even although they were being fed.
N.
I would like to try and lengthen my telomeres and see how that affects my personal aging.
N.
I'd want to know how long it'd take a group of children raised to puberty would figure out sex. I'm sure they'd figure out masturbation on some level, but how long would it take for them to figure out tab A into slot B? The kids could be raised about as normal as possible, but with any mentioning of sex and reproduction completely removed. And there would be no shame or deterrent while they figure it out. Like, the caretakers wouldn't tell them we don't do that if they found out one was masturbating, or that two consenting teenagers are touching each other. There would be some kind of explanation with trying to encourage that type of stuff in private instead of around the others. I'm just curious about how sex is kind of instinctual in other animals. It doesn't really seem that way with us. We learn from so many different sources nowadays that we don't need to figure it out ourselves. We have the internet, friends/peers, maybe parents, books, TV. My sex edition. What would it be like if we just didn't teach/explain/acknowledge it and see how long it would take for them to figure it out themselves? I want drug Olympics, where everyone using something to enhance performance, to see true limit of humans.
N.
Have participated in the ketamine Olympics many years in a row now, which just involves everyone taking a bunch of K and trying to do basic physical activities. Not exactly what you were referring to, but had some pretty fun results.
N.
I wouldn't say mad scientist, but medical privacy laws get in the way of a lot of incredibly useful research. Everything has to be so de-identified and confidential that it makes doing any sort of large-scale statistics nearly impossible. You have to make a ton of assumptions because you can know many details. If I had full access to everyone's medical records, we could probably fix a whole lot of shit.
N.
The typical discovery and clinical testing pipeline of a pharmaceutical looks something like this: cell culture, rodent models, other animals, primates, rabbits, etc. Humans. If at any step the drug fails a test, either for toxicity or efficacy, the potential drug is nixed. And this process of discovery and clinical testing can take up to 10 years at the cost of billions of dollars. What happens if your model systems can't fully recapitulate the human disease phenotype? So what happens if you've got a drug that might work really well in the human, but we never know because it gets trashed because there's no response in the mouse model? Now I completely understand the ethical concerns with testing on human subjects from the get-go. But if you asked me to don my mad scientist lab coat and goggles, I'd try to push for earlier testing on human subjects.
N.
Twins have very similar DNA. If raised exactly the same way without interaction with each other, would they make the same choices? I want to work on genetically modifying the genes that control our active cones in our eyes. Specifically, I want to try to activate a tertiary cone in the eyes of dogs so that they can see infrared light just like snakes can. In simpler terms, we could make rescue dogs that have infrared vision to help locate missing people or recover people in natural disasters. In even simpler terms, I want to make heat-seeking dogs.
N.
I would really love to have a hunk of plutonium in the attic above my bedroom. I mean, the right amount would have to be sussed out first, of course. they found that some buildings in Japan had been made with irradiated steel from stockyards near the blast zones of either Hiroshima or Nagasaki, and the people that lived in them had abnormally long and cancer-free lives. Presumably because, oh, there is a scientific term for it where your body comes into some kind of homeostasis with snake venom over long enough exposure to small doses. They think that is what happened with those people and the radiation as well. Their bodies adapted to it and became far less prone to have cancer because of it. Also, it would lower my heating bill in the winter. Plus, I really wish we could just use breeder reactors as well. Honestly, I think the government should give them away to property owners, as it would benefit the United States greatly to have a populace of people off the power grid, powering themselves independently and greenly with a stable power source that will last 100+ years for their needs. The economy would benefit. People would be more able to afford housing and emissions would go down. I'd never do the experiment, but it is hard to overstate how helpful it would be to have large-scale, longitudinal data on how different chemotherapeutic drugs/drug cocktails affect the evolutionary trajectory of tumors. The problem is that, in order to study it, you'd need to 1. Give a large number of people experimental or substandard care, which is highly unethical. 2. Perform serial surgeries, even when they aren't medically necessary, in order to collect tissue samples from the tumors. And since every surgery carries with it some risk, this is also highly unethical. I am chemist, and the answer is anything. Can you even imagine having an unlimited budget for doing HTS and SAR? Especially if you can hire some folks who do good chiral synthesis to explore all the uninvestigated chemical space that gets left behind when everything is aromatic or built on peptide bonds. Biophysicist here would love to investigate CRISPR technology in vivo cancer patients, using the technology to block cleavage from occurring at a specific DNA site. I have studied this in vitro, but experimenting in a live human being could be risky waters. 1. Use the milk from orb spiders. They mix the DNA of orb spiders with galls at Wyoming to build a better dental filling. They'd hypothetically last exponentially longer, would bond to tooth as an organic substance, and are stronger than Teflon. It would also be minimally invasive as to set the groundwork for more invasive medical applications such as knee replacements. If you fund me, I know the orb goat and dental guys. Modifying my butane torch to create a longer stream of fire. It'd basically be a lightsaber, but made of fire. Transferring consciousness to a computer so we can live forever, or reproductive cloning so everyone can have their own organs for transplantation. I mentioned this in stem cell class one day and I've been the weird girl since. Just organs or the whole body intact, practically alive, but only kept around to service your needs when you need it. If you could clone a whole human body that it came to life and interacted in daily life, would it still be your spare organ farm or a whole new human? There is also the body/organs having the same predisposition you do. So what if the heart you cloned had the same defaults as your now failing heart? Animal/human hybrids. I am not a professional scientist in this field, but electrostimulation as a means of regrowing limbs sounds pretty interesting, and I'd love to see the effects on humans. If I recall correctly, one of the problems with this is that the wound site must be kept fresh and humans bleed out too quickly if their wounds aren't able to clot, which would interrupt the regrowth. Biologist here, and I want to develop an artificial system to grow a baby outside the womb. The initial tests would involve a donor uterus, likely from a pig or primate, unless we can get a healthy one from a human hysterectomy, which would be connected to an artificial blood supply. This blood supply would be circulated through the 37C incubator using a pump to mimic the heartbeat. As the embryo develops, different chemicals will be pumped into the bloodstream to maintain appropriate levels of HCG, estrogen, progesterone, oxygen, and nutrients. I would also need to develop a way to efficiently filter out waste. If we could robotize this process, You could leave it running for 9 months and get a fully developed baby without destroying your body. This would also eliminate things like fetal alcohol syndrome and other negative effects of poor diet/drug use during pregnancy. Of course, having said all that, it's highly unethical to test on humans and probably shouldn't be done. Also very difficult to get all the chemical/blood composition right. I am an infosec guy. Do security researchers count as scientists yet? And I'd love to do social engineering experiments, but they're either illegal or immoral. I want to create miniature elephants. Through ingenious genetic manipulation I'll be able to miniaturize any living mammal. And yeah, I know there's a South Park reference. And also a Jurassic Park, the book, reference. Mostly I want a cuddly mini-phant that I can socialize as a lovely companion. All while spiking municipal water supplies to shrink the general population and go Godzilla on their asses. That's what you get for making fun of my homemade pie, Karen.